Hello, broadcast community. It is MJ Calloway here with your next episode of the Bounce Up broadcast. Now, before I introduce our co host and special guest today, please go ahead and put in the comment, where in the world are you coming from? Let us know where you're tuning in from. We would love to know. So I am so happy to welcome back my rock star co-host, Jim Kunkel. Hello, Jim.
Hello, MJ. And for everybody to know that MJ and I both live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I think it got down to what -5 Fahrenheit overnight, and it's freezing here in Pittsburgh right now.
It definitely is. And thankfully for our special guest, who is an amazing leadership expert, Tim Richardson. He's tuning in from Tennessee. So, Tim, I don't think you're as cold as we are here in the north.
Yes, and I forgive you both for living in Pittsburgh. I'm a native Floridian, as I told you, and it's cold here today, but it's not nearly as cold as Pittsburgh.
Oh my goodness. When I was walking my 7-month-old puppy today, I was thinking, okay, this is way too cold for both of us. And she had her little coat on. Now, I did see we have someone tuning in from Tennessee. So welcome.
Yeah.
Our topic today is about forgiveness. Is forgiveness a secret to success? Is forgiveness a superpower? And Tim, this is in your wheelhouse. You're talking about leadership, and forgiveness is a huge part in the workplace. But before we jump into some tips and reasons and stuff like that, some nitty gritty, what was it that had you interested in the topic of forgiveness?
Well, one of my first jobs many years ago was as a nutritional substance structural engineer, which the grocery store liked to call a bag boy back then. But my job was not only doing that, but I also stocked the soda and soft drink aisle. And over the course of my employment there, I found it very easy to take things from the opposite aisle, which was the snack aisle, without paying for them. And for the time of my employment, I was a teenager. I took a lot of things that didn't belong to me. And I don't know when it started to really fester inside of me, because my wife and I shopped at this chain and spent thousands of dollars there over the years. But I never, ever in my mind could get over the fact that I had done this. And so 30 plus years later, my family and I are vacationing in Florida, where we're from, and we happened to be driving right by this public supermarket where I had stolen all these snacks. And so I said, honey, she was driving. I said, pull in. So we pulled in. I went into the store and I asked for the store manager, and I told him what I'd done. And I said, will you forgive me? And there was the longest pause that I've ever had in a conversation before. And I was so afraid for what was going to come next. But it was that incident that really started me thinking about this importance of kind of clearing my conscience and going to, even though it wasn't the same store manager, it was the same store, and just going and saying, you know what, I made a big mistake. I'm really sorry. And will you forgive me? So that's where it all started.
Wow. Okay. I don't know, Jim. I have a number of questions about this. So first, what initiated you to actually, first, I get it, it was festering in you for a number of years. What initiated you having, stopping and going in and asking for forgiveness?
I don't know. I think it might be in part having to parent our firstborn child when he had taken something that didn't belong to me. So I think that was a factor. If we are parents, we have to be very forgiving with our children. But I think that may have been part of it. But again, it was just in the back of my mind. And because this grocery store chain was everywhere and I saw it regularly, and I was back in the community where I had done this with some regularity, it just was always in the back of my mind. And really, and I will get into this a little bit further in the conversation, I think when we have this, whatever it is inside of us that's just festering and we don't address it, it's going to hold us back. It is absolutely going to prevent us, I believe, from achieving whatever it is that we define success as, relationally, professionally, in our communities, in our families, everywhere. And so the personal and the professional side to me are so closely tied. It was obviously a somewhat professional, but it was not in my post-college work. But so anyway, that was where it started. And that was
Okay.
Yeah.
Two more questions here.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to bring up the Dr. Rhonda comment.
Okay, if I can jump into two questions before we do that. So how did you feel whenever you went in there and you released it? How did you feel when you released it?
Well, I won't say it was a great burden, but it was a burden that was released. And what it did is it taught me that the forgiveness process starts with, something pretty, I guess, simple. And those are just simply saying the words. And I never imagined what his response was going to be. And so, I had all this anxiety about it. And honestly, MJ, it wasn't like I sat down one day and said, I'm going to be there. It really kind of happened spontaneously.
Sounds it.
In addition to apologizing, I had $200 cash in my pocket, and I handed him $200 bills. And I said, here, I'd like you to take this. I don't know if it's what I actually took, but it's probably pretty close. And it would make me feel great if you would just take this money and do something positive with it there at the store. And so that's what I did. I left there $200 poorer.
So, which is amazing too. What a step for you to take. Okay, what did the manager do? What did he say? How did he respond?
Well, he said to me, I've been in management with Publix for 30 years. And he said, I've never, ever had anybody do this before. And he smiled. And he said, I want to thank you. And he told me I can't take the money. And I insisted and gave him some ideas on what I thought he should do with it. But, it was in that moment that made me realize something important for leaders to do. And the grace that he had with which he gave me made me realize how easy it is when you and I go to somebody with a sincere and authentic apology and ask for forgiveness. Good leaders are going to do that. They're going to forgive us, and they're going to help us move past that the feeling that we have held on to, as I did for that many, many years.
Oh my goodness, that is perfect right there, what you had said. And I wish I had it written down there, is that's what good leadership is. They help you get past it. They help you move forward. So great story there. And oh my goodness, what it had taken for you, but also that manager. I mean, for him, talk about showing how to lead others. So with it, what do you think happens? And Jim, do you want to pull up that comment from Dr. Rhonda?
Yeah, there's two that I'd like to bring up with Dr. Rhonda saying, forgiveness allows us to facilitate healing within and a spiritual sense of humanity and kindness despite our unhelpful thoughts or choices. Tim, with your story, I'm so used to the story of, the parent who disappeared and then surfaces 30 years later, or, the child that was given up for adoption and then the parents, they find their parents and things like that. Your story is very unique. I've never heard anybody ever do that. But, the thing is, you walked away with a sense of feeling like you fulfilled a, that act that you needed to do to ask for forgiveness, but you felt very helpful and knowledge that, I'm at peace now. I've reconciled that problem I created. So. And then the other comment I wanted to bring up here was from Donnell. We hear people talk about the need to forgive others, not for the sake, but your sake. It's an interesting take to look at the other side of that, the need to ask for forgiveness. And For me,
Yeah.
Tim and MJ, when it comes to asking for forgiveness, sometimes it's very difficult to ask for forgiveness. In some cases, it might be a challenge to have that other person give you forgiveness. So that's a big leap of faith, and also too, the healing process is much better if there is forgiveness on both sides.
Definitely. So, spinning off of that, Jim, so Tim, what would be some steps? Can you share some steps for someone to start taking? Because it's an ongoing process. Forgiveness it isn't something we decide one day and it happens the next day. It's an ongoing process, at least I have found in my life. So, what would be some steps that someone can start to take for this process of forgiveness?
Well, and first of all, I want to, Jim, you made a couple of comments about people who are dealing with issues far, far more deep and
Yeah.
emotionally scarring than what I did. But regardless, I think the process is the same.
Yeah.
First of all, I think oftentimes we need to forgive ourselves. I
Yes.
was young, I was
Mhm.
immature, I was negatively influenced by people around me, and I'm not blaming them. Ultimately, I'm the one who's responsible, but I need to forgive myself first. I made a mistake. I corrected the mistake. I learned from the mistake, and I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. And I think that's important for all of us. And I was thinking about it this
Mhm.
morning as I was sitting in my office looking out the window at the day and thinking about the pandemic. And I was telling somebody during the height of the pandemic or how frustrated I was at how unproductive that I had been. And I really beat myself up. I'm playing jazz piano on a regular basis now. And I said, if I'd have spent all those hours of worry and all those hours of anxiety doing something positive like piano or anything, how much better off I'd been. And the person responded to me and they said, you need to give yourself grace. You've never lived through that. I've never lived through anything like that. Let it go. And I did. And I
Mhm.
think that's important for all of us to be able to say, let it go. But it's easier said than done. And so as I was looking out the window this morning, I was
Yes.
thinking about, things that I had held on to and how in a moment we start focusing on this item where we need to forgive others or ask for forgiveness. And it can take us to really dark places. And so what
Can.
I suggest to people in that moment is if you can't turn it off, if you can't say, I'm not going to dwell on this anymore, physically get up or move from where you are and direct your energy to something else. Go take a walk your dog.
Mhm.
I keep some barbells in my office. So sometimes I'll just stand up and I'll do, a few curls, or I also have a piano in my office, or I'll sit over and go play the electric piano. But the act of physically removing yourself, if you're sitting at a park bench and you're having a woe is me moment, get off that park bench. If you're
Mhm.
in an office and you're doing the woe is me moment, get out of that office for a moment. Remove yourself from the place where you are when you're thinking about that. And I think that can be a really big part of trying to remove your mindset from where you are. So again, forgive yourself first. And then I think
Mhm.
also, thinking about the learning process and taking the learning from it, but then thinking about how do I prevent this from happening in the future, particularly in a leadership role. And we've all heard
Yes.
this. Be careful what you say, be careful what you write, be careful what you do, and think before you do all of those things. And I think that that'll help you get away from those situations where you're having to continually ask for forgiveness if you were the one in that. One more thing. I think that as we think about this whole issue of forgiveness and asking for forgiveness, we owe it to people in our lives, and we owe it to people that we work with, and we owe it to people to be on our best. And as I
Mm.
read things, and I pretty much do nothing with most social media except LinkedIn, which is becoming more and more Facebooky and in its feel. And I read things and it gets me so angry. And something was posted recently, and I just couldn't resist. I didn't even know this person. And I wrote a response. And a friend of mine called me that day. He said, Tim, I've totally stopped engaging with people who have deep-seated feelings like
Yes.
this person had, that are hateful, that
Hmm.
are unkind, that anger me. And I realized, I just can't change them, and I'm not going to change them. And so that was helpful to me to think about how we might distance ourselves personally and obviously professionally as well from people who cause us to well up with all this energy that might cause us to say, do, or write something that we would later regret and then have to clean up. Far easier to
Yes.
prevent it than
Hmm.
to go back and try to house clean and ask for forgiveness.
Because in that case, we've given away our power.
Absolutely.
They now have our power instead of us controlling our power. We've enabled it. We've enabled it by responding, by letting it fester. So with it, that's one of the things I always think about, because I've had to forgive a lot in the last decade. Tim, some of my story. Jim knows my story. It's very hard to forgive someone immediately who has tried to harm you. So and I'm talking, I mean, basically tried to kill me. So with it, it's very hard. But what I thought, if I don't forgive, first I'm giving my power away. Second, regardless of what that person has done or said, that person is still somebody's son, somebody's brother, and in this case, my kid's husband or my kid's father. So, it's my kid's father. So I had to forgive for myself, for my children, and then also for the sake of their dad. So with it, but finding that way, and that was what digging down and saying, okay, how can I forgive? And that's what you're talking about here was, what steps can we take? And for me, it was thinking about, this is still somebody's something, you know, somebody's son, somebody's brother, somebody's dad. So
Yeah.
going that way. So when we aren't forgiving, because it happens in workplace a lot, how does the lack of forgiveness impact the workplace?
Mhm.
Well, I started looking around a little bit and preparing for this and found multiple sources and was really actually quite surprised about the groundswell of forgiveness in the workplace. Um, I think a lack of forgiveness creates big fear. And it creates fear of being able to contribute a new idea. It feels fear of challenging a status quo or an outdated procedure. It feels fear of trying something new. And when we have that fear, what happens is people get complacent and they don't bring their best game to work. And so when you have somebody who is able to openly as a leader forgive people when they make a mistake, I think it impacts all of those things. It helps people to think that, hey, you know what, my voice matters. I can try something new. I have the freedom to do that without feeling like if I fail, the wrath is going to be, delivered to me. And so I think
Mhm.
those are among many things that benefit the workplace. And as we look at the mass exodus of what's been happening in corporate America, it's obviously very complex in nature. But in my mind, part of it
Yeah.
is this whole idea. When we work with toxic people, when we work with toxic leaders who don't set an example of giving grace and offering forgiveness and admitting when they've made a mistake and being very public about that, I think that can be something that really causes somebody to question, why would I want to stay here? Why would I want to work in this type of environment?
Yeah, that's a good point. I
Definitely.
effective leaders for me have always been the leaders that say, "Listen, if you make mistakes, that's okay. Um, Own up to them, learn from them, and come up with
Mhm.
a solution to move forward. I'm never going to beat you up for making a mistake." And I really appreciate having leaders in business or even on teams. If you work on a team with other staff or employees, it's great to have that from the leadership.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And it's coming from the top down. So it
Hmm.
impacts everybody when you have great leadership. And it impacts everybody when you don't. So I had a GM once when I had worked for a national builder and did not know when I started with the company how to read a blueprint, which was interesting because I was designing custom homes. But he would say to me, MJ, ask me the question first, come to me, ask
Yeah.
me the question, because he was teaching me how to read a blueprint and redesign a custom home. So that's when leadership is open to those questions and to teaching and to instilling, skills like that, everybody thrives, everybody does well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I thought of something else that was kind of an add-on to one of the questions you asked earlier, and I don't remember where I read this, but someone said that they started their day and they had, like you, MJ, some significant, forgiveness, difficulty in forgiveness because of the situation of their life. But she said that
Mhm.
every day before I start my day, I go in with the mindset of I'm going to forgive the people that I know are going to do or say things today that may not be kind or that may be toxic. And so she said, and we all have people that we've worked with, right, who
Yes.
are just toxic people. And so if we know
Yes.
that they're going to say something in advance, this person was talking about how, before it ever happens, I'm going to go ahead and have the mindset of I'm going to forgive them. And so that it made it a whole lot easier for her to not respond, with the angst, with the frustration, with something that might need to be cleaned up later. So I thought that was a valuable lesson to share. Just starting your day with a forgiveness mindset. And maybe it's forgiving the person who's going to cut you off in traffic or the person who gives you the middle finger or, whatever it might happen. Go ahead and have a
Okay.
mindset of, what? I'm not going to let somebody else's actions take away the contributions that I have to make today in the workplace with my family and my community and so forth.
I love that because it is so simple. You can do that after you can do that when you're still in bed.
Yep.
When you're prepping in your mind for the day ahead, to say that before you ever even get out of bed. That's awesome. I mean, it's one simple sentence that can make such a difference in your mindset and in your day and in your life when you think about it.
Yeah, and the other thing
Just
too, we're talking about forgiving others. What about forgiving yourself?
yes. Yes.
And I think that's also something too that a lot of times, for myself, I'm the type of person where I'm a golden rule person, and redemption for me is very important. And I've actually had that experience where I've had friends that have gone down the wrong path, and to see them totally change themselves and pull themselves from the brink and turn themselves and reinvent themselves into something different. You never close that door. But also too, I think when it comes to yourself, you've got to be able to channel forgiveness internally as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read several stories preparing for a segment of a speech I gave earlier this week, and it was unbelievable to me. The mother who forgave the teenager who killed her teenage son went to him in
Mm.
prison and had that
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And the excuse me, I get all choked up when I talk about this stuff, MJ and Jim. The Warwick Dunn, former NFL player, is a guy who has lost his mother, who was a police officer in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he went to prison like this mother and actually had a conversation on forgiveness. And the stories like that blow
Mm,
me away. And I
yeah.
think we have, in one sense, an unlimited capacity for greatness and success, but also we have somewhat of a limited capacity emotionally. And if we are storehousing anger and frustration
Mm,
and resentment and can't let go of that through forgiveness, I believe it impacts everything that we do. And
mhm.
so, when this incident happened with the grocery store several years ago, I started thinking to myself, who else in my life do I need to clean house with? And
Mhm.
MJS, I think I shared a story with you of somebody that I had belonged to a professional association together. We served on a board. We had socialized outside of this on numerous occasions. And unbeknownst to me, my attempts at humor, I love to laugh and I love to joke, he felt were directed at him negatively. And every time I did or said something in one of our professional gatherings, he kind of put a little ticky mark in his mind.
Mm.
And then one point he totally and absolutely cut me off. And I honestly had no idea. And when I found out, my first thought was, are you kidding me? Are you that? But it was a series of small little things. And I have to realize, and Jim, I think you talked about, or MJ earlier, we have to give the other person the benefit of the doubt. What are they going through that day? What is their background? What are their life experiences? And people are fragile. And there was a lot of baggage that he brought just simply by me saying things that I intended to be funny that he thought was cutting. And I am not a malicious, unkind person. And I had to really process, first of all, you know what? This is not about you, Tim Richardson. It's about the other person. And I needed to go to him, and I had to repeatedly, and he rejected me time and time and time again. But I felt like for me to talk about some of this stuff, I couldn't do it until I first went to people that I felt like I needed to have those conversations with. And again, I call it house cleaning. So I'd ask you all today to think about, who do you need to have some house cleaning with? And it's going to free up additional space inside of your brain and your heart for better things by simply asking for forgiveness or giving it when someone else asks you for it.
So Tim, I'm sorry.
Hard to do, easy to talk about.
Definitely.
So Tim, I'm going to bring up Carl's comment here because this is something I wanted to ask you as well. When we look at social media right now, we're not seeing a lot of forgiveness and asking for forgiveness, and we're seeing a lot of really bad, when you want to say it, attitudes, and not really dealing with people properly, as Carl says here, with dehumanizing. In politics too, we're seeing it. What are some of the things that should be done when we're talking about politics? And I know that can be a tricky subject to talk about, but more or less on social media when it comes to forgiveness.
Hey, let's dive into both of those things. Interestingly, yesterday, I believe it was Psychology Today, January 26th, had an article titled something like "Forgiving People That You Don't Know." And the idea was in relationship to politics. And we hear it every day, people, destroying with their comments our past president or our current one, or our governors, or our leaders, or people who wear masks or don't wear masks, who are vaccination free or who vaccinate. And, we hear all of these. There's so much angst behind all of this stuff. And so what I would say to Carl and everybody, and I actually did this when I posted the comment I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I made my comment and I said, note, it was a follow-up comment. Someone had responded to it. And I said, note, I feel strongly my viewpoint, and I feel that we need to agree to disagree here. And I will not be further commenting on this issue. I've stated how I believe. We feel differently, and there's so much unkindness. There's so much anger. There's so much name pointing. There's so much name calling that I'm just not going to participate in it. And so I think we're clear when we communicate. And I believe, first of all, we're better not off to not engage in it at all. But it just kept boiling up inside me that I felt like I wanted to say something. Probably doesn't do any good. And I think that's another thing we need to realize. Carl, you and I aren't going to change people no matter how gifted a writer or speaker we are. We simply are not going to do that. And I think sometimes, particularly when we don't know people, we've got to agree to disagree, but also when we know them well. And I'm sure people listening in have experienced this as well. I felt it in my own family, the tension over the last couple of years and how people feel about politics in particular. It's breaking families apart. It's breaking relationships apart. And in about a 3-week period of time, I didn't solicit this, but I had 4 people in my life. One, a long time friend, another a past client, another somebody I was working on a personal project here with, and I don't even remember the fourth person, but each of those people told me about situations in their life where two people or groups of people within a family or close-knit business environment totally and absolutely stopped talking to each other. They cut people off. And so, you know what? My views are my views. And Carl, you're not going to change them. Jim, you're not going to change them. MJ, you're not going to change. Nobody on this call is going to change the way that I feel. And so just realize that to engage with people, particularly on social media, but also in the workplace, when we know we're not going to come to a agreement on how that might be better, is fruitless. Avoid it. Stop doing it. Get off it. And I feel pretty strongly about that, as you can tell.
Yes.
In fact, Facebook to me is waste book, and I've all but stopped participating in any conversation there. But it's eked into LinkedIn and other places as well. So don't engage. That would be my advice, particularly on social media, but again, also in the workplace.
I will second that. Don't engage. I go by the motto is their perspective is their perspective, and my perspective is mine. I don't have to engage with theirs, and I don't have to share mine. And that has kept me out of any of those conversations where I might have to forgive. So
one other quick thought here. I've shared this with people in my family for years. So my father was a minister. And when he passed away, when I was going through his stuff, I found an autographed picture of one of our past presidents. And I don't remember the exact amount, but I remember that to get an autographed picture, you had to contribute a sizable amount of money to their political campaign. And I remember kind of being shocked. I didn't realize that he would have supported this person. And it really shocked me. But his belief is the best he could. He felt like he needed in his job as a minister to preach principles that were applicable to everyone and not be political. And that's certainly not the case today. I think even in a church or a synagogue or a place of worship, there's a lot of politics. But he believed he could avoid it by just not going there. And so I think that's, again, really great advice for all of us. Don't go there.
Agree. So what resources would you suggest for someone who is struggling with forgiveness?
Again, I went to the internet before we had this call. I found some worksheets, ironically, on, I think it was Psychology Today or Positive Psychology, to work through some of this. There's a book I read several years ago that I read many times called Fierce Conversations. It really walked you through step by step how to do that. The other thing that I think found super valuable is you having somebody close to you. I'm fortunate in having a spouse that I can have conversations with when I get in these situations, and she's great about giving me advice when I start storehousing little stuff. And then the last thing I talk about a lot in my presentation and speeches is something I call a circle of six. And for years, I've had people in my life who are either in a mentorship kind of group or a networking mastermind type of group, or maybe just friends who I can go to and say, I'm struggling with this. What do you think? And so I think having an outside perspective, and it might be a counselor, it might be a minister, it might be a rabbi, it might be, a best friend, but having somebody that you can simply go to when you're struggling with the types of things that we've been talking about on this call and say, hey, you know what? I'm not sure how to handle this. Because sometimes we're so close to it and we hold so much emotion about it that we can't see what's right there in front of everybody else. So those would be a couple of things that I would share that I think might be valuable to people as they navigate the difficultness of asking for and granting forgiveness to others.
MJ.
I call that my power team, my circle of influence. I have 5 people, and different, one's an accountability partner, different types of people that I have in my life, but I call it my power team. And then I will seek out help from my power team.
MJ, could your accountability partner help out in this situation too?
Definitely. So my accountability partner, she is a burnout expert. Her name is Laura Greco. And if anybody wants to go back to It was our accountability broadcast. So that was what, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
They can go back. Laura's contact information is in there, but it definitely, she is a sounding board and also grounds me. So, yeah. So definitely, Tim, agree with you there.
Yeah.
So, Tim, what closing thoughts do you have? Do you have anything as we get ready to wrap up that you would want to share that you have not yet?
Well, so I think all of us probably have, like me, somebody that they have not yet cleaned house with. And so right now, I'd like you to think about who that person is, maybe write them down and pick up the phone, or better yet, meet in person. Or if you can't do that, send an email and ask for or grant forgiveness to somebody in your life. And I'll promise you, if you go with the right kind of heart, that even if you feel like they may not be receptive to it, at some level, it's going to change the situation, certainly for you and hopefully for the other person. So I would really urge you to just to think about it. You might not even know, but maybe there's somebody who's just, they're different than they used to be with you. And you can ask some questions, and then you really listen and don't apologize. I mean, don't make excuses, but yet apologize. Our tendency, I believe, sometimes is to justify our behavior. Well, I didn't know that that's how you felt on that. But if I had been, well, I was having all this stress. None of that matters. What matters is you've damaged a relationship, or someone has damaged a relationship with you, and you humbly, kindly, and authentically go to that person and say, you know what? I need your help. I don't understand why there's this distance between us when we used to be so close, and forgive me for what for whatever I might have done. And I think that you'll find that you'll have some relief that you might never imagine that you would have. So that would be my advice: is make a phone call today. Make a phone call today to clean house with somebody, and then open up that space inside your heart and brain for something bigger and better.
I like how you say clean house. The other word that I liked that I thought was a great way to explain it was, you said, a storehouse of anger.
Yeah.
So if you have a storehouse of anger or anxiety or angst, whatever it is, that's a trigger. So that either you need to forgive or be forgiven. So if you have that storehouse, but I love that term you use there. So, all right. Thank you so much, Tim. Jim, do you have any last thoughts you want to share?
I really appreciate this conversation with Tim. Thank you so much. And the way I look at it too is, as you go through your life, you have to be able to release these that you're holding inside and giving forgiveness. And sometimes maybe you're asking for forgiveness. Maybe you have somebody in your life that, they disappeared on you. They wronged you, but maybe you need to reach out to them to get them to understand why there needs to be some forgiveness on both sides. So it takes strength, inner strength, to go and do that. So, I again, Tim, great conversation.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Give a shout out here to Denise,
Yeah.
formerly from Pittsburgh. Yay! So what a great conversation. Appreciate you sharing everything with us, Tim. So how can, if our viewers who are watching, those who watched the replay, how can they get a hold of you?
So best way is email Tim, my name, at timrichardson.com. I'm also on LinkedIn quite a bit, so you can reach out to me there, and I'm happy to engage, happy to answer conversations, and would love to hear your stories. I love hearing stories of forgiveness and the positivity that happened as a result, or maybe even the challenges that people are still dealing with. So feel free to reach out. And Jim, MJ, thank you again. I love sharing ideas. I hope these will be helpful to people as they think about their roles in life, in leadership, and in their organization. So thanks again for the invite.
Absolutely. And you also have a newsletter on LinkedIn, so people can also they can subscribe to that. So, and I know Jim also has a newsletter on LinkedIn too. And Jim, how can someone get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way is obviously through LinkedIn. And I have a broadcast every Wednesday at noon called Build Out, and it focuses on business topics, and we have great guests. And hopefully Tim one day here in the near future, I'll have you as a guest as well, talking about leadership qualities and things like that. But also, too, you can go to buildoutproductions.com. That's buildoutproductions.com, and join the mail list to keep updated on new content and other information and material coming from myself and other broadcasters like MJ that we work together.
All right. And I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody who stayed with us throughout this broadcast. We appreciate it. Please, whenever the replay comes up, share it, make your comments, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at mjcalloway.com or connect with me here on LinkedIn. Would appreciate it. And as we wrap up, remember to make it a bounce up day.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.